Welcome back to the final mission of the road to Montebourg. This is it, the last mission of the campaign. We fought all the way from Utah Beach to St. Mary-Glees to La Ham, and now we've just got the village of Eroudeville to deal with. It's almost 8:30 in the evening of June the 10th, and the 8th Infantry Regiment has been fighting all day, trying to push forward and take up a line on the Montebourg-La Ham Railway, which runs along some dominant high ground between Montebourg and Montebourg Station. 1st Battalion is attacking on the north side of Eroudeville, and 2nd Battalion, after taking the farmhouse in the last mission, is moving in from the south. The mission is to take and hold the southern half of Eroudeville itself before exiting the map via the northwest corner to advance towards the railway line. There are 450 points for occupying the village, and another 500 for the exit objective, compared to 100 points for destroying the enemy, and another bonus 100 for keeping my casualties below 20%, so there's a pretty clear emphasis on securing Eroudeville and getting forces off map. I've got a pretty chunky force at my disposal here. To start with, I have Easy Company backed up by some off-map assets, a 2-tube 81mm mortar section and two 105mm self-propelled guns, like we saw in the last mission. After approximately 10 minutes, Fox Company will be turning up as well, along with a mixed platoon of Shermans, 3 with 75mm guns and 2 with 76mm guns, which have much better armour penetration. These are followed at roughly 15 minutes by another pair of off-map 81s, and then at about 40 minutes by a forward observer team and a 2-tube section of 4.2-inch heavy mortars, like we had back at La Ham. On the one hand, it's nice to have all this stuff. I have a lot of infantry, tanks are always welcome, and I have a decent amount of artillery. On the other hand, there's the rolling concern that I'm being given a large force because I'm going to need it. The briefing indicates that the German force here is a mix of elements from the 243rd Infantry Division and Sturmbattalion AOK 7, including some assault guns. The 243rd is a static division organised and equipped for local defence. They're the kind of second or third line formation that the Germans are relying on to hold on and slow down the Allies until reinforcements arrive. Sturmbattalion AOK 7, on the other hand, are the local reinforcements for the area, and they're likely to be tougher and better trained, although their presence in this mission probably indicates that the German commander feels threatened enough to commit his reserve. Reconnaissance from earlier in the afternoon, made possible by the rapid capture of the farmhouse in the last mission, has given a pretty good impression of the enemy defence. Combining the notes in the briefing with pre-battle recon spotting, it looks like there are at least 5 enemy concentrations to deal with. The first is apparently an ambush set up in the Ferme de Mouchel, just outside of my setup zone. The second is a position in the triangular wood just up that flank and includes at least 1 AT gun. The third and fourth are in Eroudeville and its outskirts in the northeast corner of the map, and the fifth consists of a battery of 88mm guns set up in Les Hauts Bois, halfway up the opposite map edge. The woods are on the high ground, and those 88s look like they can cover a significant chunk of the map. Being able to plot the location of these 5 positions shows a pretty clear layout to the defence. Clearly, the enemy is expecting me to fight up the road from my setup zone, past the Ferme de Mouchel and the Triangular Wood, and into Les Damiens and Ham de l'Église, before swinging right into Eroudeville, all while the 88s in Les Hauts Bois shoot me from their hill. So my immediate reaction is, let's not do that. I'm prepared to use my force like a blunt instrument if I have to, but headbutting my way through this defence as intended is probably going to give me more than a headache. I don't want to fight on the enemy's terms unless I absolutely have to, and because this is a pretty big map at about 1 kilometre square, I've got plenty of space to manoeuvre in. Fairly naturally, I want to go left out of my setup zone, punch across the map, avoiding these strong points in front of me, and then swing into Les Hauts Bois from the south and overrun the 88s. Then I can set some forces on the dominant high ground to support an attack on Eroudeville from an unexpected direction, with the bulk of my force within easy reach of the exit objective when the time comes, or in position to forestall any unmentioned but possible enemy reinforcements coming in from this angle. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. there's a double line of barrage running along the left side of my setup zone all the way up to the line of the Ferme de Mouchel, and without any pioneers, engineers or breach teams, I'm not getting through it. In fact, it looks like I'm pretty much locked into attacking straight forward and engaging the Ferme de Mouchel ambush and the position in the triangular wood before I can even think about diverting left. And even then, hooking onto the flank would mean a 150 meter backtrack on the edge of a huge open field covered by the 88s. I have a feeling that that double barrage is there precisely to stop me from going left, which doesn't mean I'm not going to try it, but it does mean that, at least to begin with, I am railroaded into smashing those first two German positions on the right flank. That's not great, but I have 90 minutes for this battle, and by the time I've neutralised the Ferme de Mouchel and the triangular wood, most of my force will have arrived on the map, and I'll have a feeling for the defence, so I can better determine whether I need to hook left and avoid punching straight for Eroudeville, or whether I can just smash my way forward. Before we start though, I need to think about my artillery support. Now is the easiest time to organise some fire missions, and with a second set of 81s and the 4.2 inch mortars set to become available later, it seems like a good idea to get my starting assets going right away. My two problem areas feel like they're going to be the 88 position in Le Hautbois and the Eroudeville objective itself, though the triangular wood might also need some attention. After a little deliberating, I've decided to saturate the 88 position with the medium mortars. The spots for the guns are spread out in a line about 90 meters long, which means that they're not the best target, but they are the single greatest known threat at the start of the battle, and I don't want them shooting up my flank. So while a medium barrage dropping all 110 81mm high explosive bombs from the mortars on that battery position might not be tremendously efficient, it should achieve something. Even knocking one gun out will make life easier, and there are likely to be all kinds of support elements up there too, like ammo bearers and security teams, so something should get hit. I'm tempted to unload the 105s on Eroudeville in the same way, but after my experience at Le Ham, where plastering the buildings achieved absolutely nothing, I'm more inclined to save Eroudeville for the heavy mortars if necessary, and dump the 105s on the triangular wood. This barrage is a little different from the fire mission aimed at the 88s. Up there I want to destroy those guns and kill their crews, while down here suppression is also an important factor. I'm going to be approaching this position much earlier, and I'm essentially going to have to attack it from the front, so although a short sharp shock might cause some casualties, chances are the defenders will have gone over it by the time I get there. A longer, slower barrage is hopefully going to maintain some steady pressure on the Germans in the woods and keep them suppressed for the upcoming firefight. Plus, if I'm lucky, I'll be able to call off the 105s before they use up all their ammunition and save it for later. As the mortars and the 105s go in, I'm moving forward on a 2-platoon front. This is mostly because I only have space for 2 platoons. On the left, I'm moving up with an eye to observing the triangular wood. On the right, the aim is to close with and destroy the German force in the Ferme de Mouchel. This involves my two least favourite things, fighting in woods and fighting in buildings. I don't really have much choice in how I approach either. I'm just going to have to walk up through the woods until someone gets shot and go from there. Right on cue, my scouts walk into a hail of MP40 fire and one of them goes down. I don't want to feed the enemy bodies in a close range firefight here, but when I push some troops up further to the left, with an eye to opening an angle for suppressive fire, an MG in the top floor of the main building joins in and sends my pixel truck packing. Applying pressure across the whole width of the wood is enough to knock one of the Germans in the first house down, causing the other two to flee. Moving to exploit, my pixel truck can follow up into their building, but are immediately kicked out again by a hail of SMG fire from across the courtyard, leaving one man behind. The second team moving into the main farmhouse at the same time bags the MG team up on the top floor and gets into a firefight with the new enemy contact, trading 2 for 1. It takes another couple of turns to bring enough firepower onto the enemy in the Ferme de Mouchel to wipe them out, but in the end there are only 8 of them in total, and when the last man goes down, the right flank is secure all the way up the map to the edge of Le Demian. It was a nasty little fight, but a necessary one that I had to finish off pretty quickly. With that angle secure, my next problem is the German position in the triangular wood. This is being steadily pummeled by the 105s, and as I bring a few scouts up through the orchard across the road for my attack on the further through shell, it seems like it was probably a good move to hit the woods with preparatory fire. Some trenches are quickly spotted, followed by a wooden bunker. A couple of my more optimistic pixel truppen open up on this, but despite drawing some MG fire in return, they actually managed to pick off the Germans inside and neutralise it. A little later, an abandoned Pack 40 is spotted surrounded by shell craters, and with some fleeting spots of enemy troops fleeing through the trees, it looks like the arty has done its job and successfully neutralised the position. I can call the fire mission off and save the ammo for Eroudeville. Apart from the speed bump of physically clearing the triangular wood, I now have what looks like a relatively clear run down the road to Les Damiens and Ham de l'Église. I could go for this, fight through that area and spring up into Eroudeville, perhaps coordinating with a push via the triangular woods, but as I pointed out a little earlier, not only does this mean I'm fighting through this defence the way the defender intends me to fight through it, but I'd be exposed to flanking fire from the 88s up on Les Hautes-Bois. These 88s have had 110 81mm mortar bombs dropped on them by this point, courtesy of that opening barrage, but although I can examine the crater pattern and guesstimate that all of the guns have suffered some near misses that should have done something, I have no idea if any of them are actually still up and running. I'm not optimistic about my chances of sneaking tanks past 88s, and anyway I want to explore the option that is the left flank. So off go a couple of men from Easy Company's 2nd Platoon, out the front of the orchard, then left, and immediately left again, to run along the inside edge of the muddy field towards what is hopefully the safety of the wheat field on the map border. Somewhat surprisingly, they make it. I was expecting something, at least, if not a high-velocity HE shell from an 88, then some MG or rifle fire, even mines perhaps, but there's nothing. So despite the slightly aggravating fact that I'm having to go the long way round to get into the field adjacent to my deployment zone, it looks doable. More teams from 2nd Platoon start out on the trip. They're split down and well spaced out to minimise any potential casualties, which makes everything slower, but at this point I still have 75 minutes left, which should be plenty of time. I can't help shake the feeling that I should be putting the pressure on though. It's all well and good being clever and plotting a route around the enemy defences, but the time I have is finite, and with Fox Company and the tanks already here, I'm neither in contact with the enemy nor using 5 out of my 6 infantry platoons. It feels like I should be doing a lot more right now, but moving forward in enough force to make a meaningful push down the road or filtering any more troops left seems risky given the possibility of the surviving 88s. I am, however, in a position to move out quickly once 2nd Platoon has confirmed the guns are out of action. Obviously I'm losing time, but the flip side is that once any enemy force in Les Hautes-Bois is dealt with, I won't have to detour all the way around the left flank to get up there in preparation to either attack Eroudeville or reach the exit objective. I should be able to cut straight across the muddy field in the centre of the map, shaving off some time and distance. And if 2nd Platoon encounters significant resistance up there, I should have enough time to double down on that angle or reorient and commit elsewhere. I essentially have the entire rest of my force in reserve right now. About 60 minutes in, some puffs of smoke pop up on a few trees in the centre of the map. Rewinding the turn shows that these are tree bursts, where a shell has been intercepted by branches before it's reached its destination, and by drawing a line through the tree bursts back towards the pre-battle intel spots for the 388s in Les Hautes-Bois, it seems pretty obvious that at least one of them is not only still crude and functional, but actively targeting my infantry. And there's not an awful lot I can do about that. On the next turn, the 88 has switched to engaging my pixel truppen as they pass through the gate into the muddy field, and this time the tree bursts are close enough to injure a few men and cause a casualty. So it looks like that exit is now dialed in. On the plus side, most of 2nd Platoon is either already across the danger area or able to sprint the final stretch, and while the existence of a functional high-velocity anti-tank gun 700 meters away across the map is somewhat concerning, I have already accounted for it in my plans. But then there's always that lucky shell that manages to miss all of the trees and branches in its way, miss its intended target, slip through some bocage and hit something important. There's no way that the 88 can see this Sherman 75 on the road. It's a ridiculous overshoot, but a hit is a hit. Perhaps I should have realised the Sherman was in the firing line and shifted it back a bit, but that's easy to say in hindsight. It's my first tank casualty of the campaign, with the 88mm shell punching into the upper left hull, killing the bow gunner and totaling the tank. The crew bails out and runs off into the woods by the firm shell, but not before the driver is cut down by MG fire coming down the road from Les Damiens. This has really hammered home how effective the 88s are, confirmed my caution up to this point, and put even more pressure on 2nd Platoon to get up the map, to flank and destroy that position as fast as they can. It's a long way up to the woods on foot though, about 1 kilometre all in all, and although the scout team in the lead is just about getting up to the diagonal road, the platoon is strung out along the edge of the map, and I'm going to have to decide whether I want to stop for the whole unit to assemble before making the attack, or whether that's going to take too long and it'll be more time effective to feed them in as they come up. The answer, as it so often does, comes from the scouts. As they get up to the bocage along the road at the top of the last wheat field, they spot a wooden bunker in the edge of Les Hautes Bois, which is just fantastic. There's a big difference between sending out a single infantry platoon to roll up a relatively vulnerable AT gun battery from the flank, and sending out a single platoon to assault a fortified position which just happens to have some AT guns in it. But some quick dirty terrain analysis indicates that it might be possible to sneak around the bunker's field of view using some dead ground across the road. Pushing the tiring scouts forward again confirms this, and soon I've got them and a team with a bazooka up onto the flank of the bunker. It doesn't look like there are any more Germans hanging around in the woods here, and with the right equipment, it's easy enough to take the bunker out. It seems like this area of the woods is now open for business, and I'm committed to dribbling 2nd Platoon in as they come up in order to keep moving fast. The scouts and the bazooka team probe forwards, taking out another bunker along the way, with other small teams following, ready to spread out the attack or take over as necessary. The scouts are just coming up on the flank of the AT guns and what looks like a third bunker, when one of them gets shot. The culprit is some kind of bolt-action rifle, probably from a gun crew or ammo bearer team rather than any German rifle infantry, but it's a sign that the easy progress through the woods has come to an end and I'll have to start fighting. For that, I need more bodies, and although the rest of 2nd Platoon is closing in, they feel uncomfortably far away. I need those 88s taken out as fast as possible, because there's been a critical development in the centre. In the end, it was a bit too much to sit around and do literally nothing while I was pushing the far left, so I've been probing the triangular wood. There are a couple of German pixel truppen still clinging on in there, and more hanging around in the fields behind. But these are easy enough to sort out, and soon I've got some bodies into the enemy trenches. That's the good news. The bad news is that I'm getting a string of spots moving down from the track leaving Les Hautes Bois, and these are pretty much heading straight towards the triangular wood. I know there's infantry, but after a few turns some armour contacts develop, and these are quickly revealed to be Stugs. In their way, I have a couple of rifle teams. Moving support up is a little tricky. Not only are there occasional enemy mortar bombs dropping on the route and the ever-present concern of the 88s, but I don't have a huge selection of fighting positions up at the triangular woods to begin with. My first instinct is to occupy this field boundary and catch the incoming enemy force in the flank, but it's another enclosed double hedgerow line that completely blocks movement and line of sight. That leaves the triangular wood itself directly in front of the German advance. The plus side is that whether the enemy swing along the road towards Eroudeville or carry straight on across the open fields towards me, they're going to be very exposed. A few shots from my pixel truppen here and there are enough to get them to slow down and take cover, even if they attract the attention of one of the Stugs, and I've brought the platoon HQ up to try and call in the newly available second section of 81mm mortars, what with all this German infantry presenting a perfect target. Unfortunately, the enemy have mortars of their own, and before the fire machine can get called in, the platoon HQ and its nearby infantry get pasted with some direct hits. The platoon leader is killed, leaving my own mortars locked into the call for fire process until they figure out the guy on the other end of the radio isn't talking back. I need more firepower up there as soon as possible, and just after the enemy mortar strike finishes, one of my Sherman 76s rolls up. Bringing some armour in is an obvious risk, though it looks like my efforts to hug the barrage and keep it out of line of sight of the 88s has paid off. I don't want to just roll it up onto the hedgerow and face off against a couple of stugs in a bucket full of German Pixeltruppen though, so I'm slotting it into a defilade position where it can peek out from behind the barrage and hopefully get some flanking shots on any enemy forces moving down the road to Eroudeville. Things are looking a bit dicey though. I don't expect that Sherman 76 to last long if enemy infantry get up to the barrage right next to it and overcome my battered, shaken infantry, but it's better than nothing. Up in Les Hautes-Bois, I found the first 88. The crew abandon it after a little encouragement and I'm able to plough on. The second platoon is tired and under stress, advancing up the line of the AT battery position, stumbling onto painful little groups of Germans, but they've got to keep going. They find the second 88 already abandoned, and after more slogging forwards and a few more casualties, they finally get a spot on the last gun. This doesn't go down without a fight. The crew swing it round and actually get a shot off at point blank range, and this panics my lead teams, but after exerting some more pressure, the Germans crack, abandon the 88, and run out of the woods into the fields. And just like that, Les Hautes-Bois is clear, the 88s are out of the picture, and I've regained the freedom of movement I need to get stuck into that German counterattack on the triangular wood. I've already had some outstanding good luck while the 88s were being mopped up. One of the Stugs moved up along the road towards the village, exposing its flank to the triangular wood, but while the defiladed Sherman 76 lost the spot and started to engage the enemy infantry around it, a lucky 76mm shell clipped the back of the unspotted Stug before repeated penetrations set off a catastrophic explosion. One down, but it was pure luck. The Sherman was engaging a tripod-mounted MG42 behind the Stug and never actually made the spot on the armour target, probably due to the rapidly gathering darkness and the muzzle flashes of the MG, but I suppose after the incident with the 88 shell earlier, it's 1-1 on the lucky shot score sheet. There's at least one more Stug out there, tucked behind some low barrage near the centre barns, and it's looking directly at my positions in the triangular wood. The last thing I want to do is get into a head-to-head engagement with it. I have a bazooka team following some scouts up the edge of the muddy field to get into a flanking position, but after even more German mortar fire on my dwindling Pixeltruppen manning the barrage opposite the German infantry, I need to do something faster or risk losing the position. With the 88s out of action, I've managed to get a Sherman 75 up, and now that the enemy Pixeltruppen are within 100 metres, I'm going to have to commit it and risk exposing it to the Stug. I'm more interested in shooting up the German infantry here, but the Sherman's TAC AI quickly spots the Stug, makes the sensible decision to prioritise the greater threat, and engages immediately. The range is about 350 metres, which is extremely close for tanks. The first shot hits the barrage just in front of the Stug, but thanks to the encroaching dusk and the hedgerows, it doesn't seem to spot the Sherman. An agonisingly long reload later, followed by some minor adjustments by the gunner, and the second round strikes the Stug's weapon mount just at the base of the barrel. It's not immediately clear whether this is enough to disable the gun. It wasn't a penetrating hit, but it can't be good for the barrel to get smacked like that. The next turn reveals that it must have done something, because the Sherman goes on to miss twice without the Stug replying in any way. The fifth shot of the engagement strikes the muzzle brake, definitively damaging the main gun and rendering the Stug a mobile pillbox. And with that, the pressure is off the triangular wood. The two Shermans there can now switch to engaging enemy infantry, and soon the German counterattack, headed in this direction at least, has been blunted. By now we're about 50 minutes in, leaving 40 or so on the clock, and it's time to get a move on. With Les Hautes-Bois clear and the triangular wood secure, that route up the left flank is open, and soon I have my other two surviving Shermans racing across the muddy field soon to be followed by hordes of infantry. But this raises the question of what to do with them when they get up to the woods. Essentially, I have a choice: go for the exit objective, up on the track coming out of Les Hautes-Bois, or go for the Eroudeville objective. There's definitely part of me that says the village is a strong point, go around it. But even if I do that, it'll make sense to get at least a few bodies into the objective area to deny the enemy the points. I can defer making a real decision until I get forces up there though. It'll take some time to move the mostly intact Fox Company across the muddy fields to the area in front of Les Hautes-Bois, and in the meantime I still need to clean up what's left of the German counterattack force lurking in the fields. It feels worth pointing out that had I punched for Les Damiens with the intent of swinging left into Eroudeville, I would have been very vulnerable to those German reinforcements. It's hard to judge for certain, but it looks like it was about in company strength, with one platoon attacking straight towards the triangular wood, and the other two seemingly breaking off towards the village. Being caught in the flank by such a significant force, or having to fight my way through it head on, feel like much worse possibilities than what actually happened, especially given that the skeleton force I had in the triangle soaked up a lot of mortar fire that could have wreaked havoc on a larger force. The battle isn't over yet though. With the sun setting and the light steadily fading, my pixel truppen get to mopping up the Germans in the centre of the map. First up is the Stug at the barns, which I flanked with the bazooka team I sent forward earlier. Sneaking up on it around the corner of the buildings, the first shot is intercepted by the forward right side skirt, but after reloading, the bazooka gunner manages to score a penetrating hit that knocks out the engine. A third hit goes through the gap in the skirts and hits just next to one of the return rollers, prompting the commander to bail out. He runs off into the adjacent wheat field, but he's on his own. Apparently, the rest of the crew didn't make it. Elements of 2nd Platoon up in Les Hautes-Bois have spotted a couple of tripod-mounted MG42s in the next field over, and soon they also spot a 3rd Stug. I've brought my 2 of the Shermans up onto the shoulder of Les Hautes-Bois, near where 2nd Platoon knocked out a couple of bunkers, in the hope that they might get eyes on the Stug and take it out with a flanking shot. They're struggling to make the spot though, and I'm pushing 2 bazooka teams in close as insurance. One, the team that took out the barn Stug, is approaching from the side, while the other is moving down the track from Les Hautes-Bois to come up behind it. Apparently, the Stug is paying attention though, and it swivels round, getting a shot off that neutralises the rear bazooka team. The muzzle flash of the Stug's 75mm gun is a huge signature in the dark though, and it's given its position away. The Sherman 76 by Les Hautes-Bois can draw a line and starts aiming, but is beaten to it by the Sherman 75 back at the triangular woods, which has moved forwards a little bit. The 75mm AP round punches through the left corner of the superstructure of the Stug and knocks it out. Nobody bails, and the German tank sits burning in the field. The machine gun teams nearby stubbornly persist, but eventually they're snuffed out too after getting some 81mm mortars dropped on them. At this point there are 30 minutes left on the clock. I'm not much closer to Eroudeville, but I have a clear path to the exit objective, and although moving Fox Company's intact platoons up across the muddy field is a lot slower than I would like, there's nothing stopping them from waltzing straight up to Les Hautes-Bois and getting off the map to where they can take up positions on the Montebourg railway line and that all-important high ground. What's really facing me here is a numbers question. Eroudeville is worth a lump 450 points, and exiting the map is worth up to 500, with points accumulating as more units leave via the exit zone. My dilemma is whether or not I need both of these to win. If I only need one, then of course I should bypass Eroudeville entirely, avoid the casualty generating mess that is clearing an urban area at dusk, and go for the exit. If I need both, then I should get a move on and start pasting the place. Moving up and clearing that chunk of village could easily take much longer than the half hour I have left. In the end I go for a compromise. Fox Company is going to continue moving to the exit, while Easy Company and the tanks, minus 2nd Platoon up in Les Hautes-Bois, will attack Eroudeville with an eye to gaining a toehold. My thinking here is that if I can get into that objective area, then I'm at least denying it to the enemy, and, at best, I'll be able to exert enough pressure on the defenders to make them crumble. To help out with this, the FO team has finally gotten into position, and they're able to call in what remains of the 105s and the entire ammunition load of the 4.2-inch heavy mortars on the closest side of Eroudeville. This makes a very satisfying mess, knocking down buildings and walls, and is hopefully making the Germans hiding in there either extremely nervous or extremely dead. Inevitably though, things don't go as smoothly as I would like. The Sherman platoon HQ that was up at Les Hautes-Bois gets bogged and immobilised in the field, and there are far more aggressively alive little groups of shattered German heavy weapon teams and rifle squads hanging around in the fields between me and Eroudeville than I'm happy about. As it gets darker and darker, spotting is becoming increasingly difficult, and usually the first indication that there are enemy pixel tripping up ahead are sudden muzzle flashes and incoming rounds. I've put about 10 hours into the battle at this point, and unsurprisingly I'm starting to get sloppy and impatient. The smart thing to do would be to save the game and pick it up tomorrow, but I'm so close to finishing the whole campaign here, I'm running the risks. The problem is that the risks are a bit higher than I'm anticipating. Moving my remaining mobile Sherman 75 up to the diagonal road to get a better angle on some Germans in the top floor of one of Eroudeville's buildings exposes it to an unseen threat. A single shot penetrates the turret front just above the gun mantlet on the left side. The commander and loader are killed, the gunner is injured, and the tank is a total write-off. The survivors bail and cower in the field as the Sherman 76 from the triangle casually rolls up alongside before the turn ends and I can stop it. There's a fourth Stug just inside Eroudeville, and I'm very lucky it doesn't spot the 76. The presence of enemy armour has at least woken me up a little, and my push into the village is now going to be funneled by an urge to stay out of the Stug's field of fire. The first few steps into Eroudeville are pretty painless, but going further draws heavy fire from three sides. The area I'm pushing into and the centre are pretty much clear. It's the buildings around the edge which are still occupied by the enemy. My pixel trippen are running into a fire sack where they take some heavy losses. Bringing the two Sherman 76s into the fight allows me to gain a little breathing space, but they quickly switch focus from the enemy infantry in the buildings to the Stug. The assault gun is masked behind a building, but I'm not going to let that get in my way. The house is only small, and has probably already taken some structural damage from the deluge of artillery earlier, so it only takes a couple of shots to bring it down. This reveals the left side of the Stug, and one of the Shermans immediately puts a hole in it, knocking it out. Even so, things are not looking good in Eroudeville. It's very dark now, and the village is crisscrossed by streams of tracers from both sides and all angles. Despite all the pressure, the Germans show little sign of cracking. With 10 minutes left, I'm almost ready to write off the push as a bad job. I've got a toehold sure, so at least the objective is denied to the enemy, but that leaves me hoping that the accumulated exit points of Fox Company and all the other assorted elements I've been funneling off the map are enough to core a victory. But, as so often in combat mission when you're suffering, it's always worth remembering that the other guy is suffering just as much or more. I'm not the one with two tanks hosing down my troops, and at the 8-minute mark it all becomes too much for the Germans. They surrender. It's a bit of a surprise, but a welcome one. A quick once-over of the end screen reveals that the exit objective simply isn't there. I don't know whether that's a mistake or a mismatch between the briefing and the end screen, but a quick rewind to the save before reveals that ceasefiring without securing Eroudeville would have netted me a minor defeat, instead of a total victory. So overall, a good job the enemy gave up. They could have done so earlier though. This mission was even bloodier than hell in the hedgerows. I've lost 40 dead and 37 wounded, plus 2 tanks. Almost all of these casualties were from easy company. First, the attack on the Ferme de Mouchel, then clearing Les Hautes-Bois and holding the triangular wood, topped off at the end by messily punching into Eroudeville. The silver lining is that I still have 272 men still in the fight, and that I'm sure if I had attacked as the defence had intended, slogging through position after position under fire from the 88s, and with a company-sized counterattack reinforced by armour striking me in the flank, then I would have suffered much more. For their part, the Germans have 62 men still going, including some untouched elements that I bypassed in Les Damiens and Ham de l'Église, but they've been seriously chewed up. The fact that they've suffered 147 dead, 81 wounded and 1 missing, with all 4 Stugs knocked out, goes a long way to explaining their eventual surrender. So that is it. Clicking end here takes us to the final screen of the campaign, where it's a total victory for the Allies. 16 missions, 11 total victories and 5 major victories, a grand total of 174 men dead and 157 wounded, with 2 tanks lost. Throughout the campaign, the Germans have lost 767 men dead and 415 wounded, with 41 men missing and 8 tanks and 3 armoured vehicles lost. That works out to a ratio of about 3.5 to 1 in my favour, but the looming caveat is that the AI is not as capable as a human opponent and doesn't represent the same kind of challenge. What I do think the campaign does represent, though, is a good introduction to combat mission Battle for Normandy, especially to infantry tactics and the US Army in June 1944. The individual missions are well put together. I was down to the time limit and felt like I had only just clinched victory in the last moment in almost all of them, which is a sign of excellent level design, so well done and huge thanks to Paper Tiger for crafting the campaign. If you want to play it yourself, it comes with the base game for Battle for Normandy, and even if you've watched all these videos and are prepared to treat this series like a walkthrough, there's still a lot of mechanical details around orders, waypoints and timings that are important to get your head around but don't translate well into this style of video, so there's some practical value in giving it a go. And so finally, after 10 years of owning combat mission Battle for Normandy, I've actually gotten round to playing through the Road to Montebourg campaign. I doubt I'm going to tackle another 16 mission monster campaign anytime soon. It has taken literally over a year to get to the end of this, but there are plenty of shorter campaigns out there. This has been very infantry and US focused, so next up for World War II I think it's time to do something a little more panzer oriented. That's all for now though. Hope you all enjoyed this, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.